we're just pre-show chatting here. So, but a lot of venues have just kind of more picked up on the singles, the soloists or duos, and
Right.
not a full bands.
True.
And some of it I think is financial, maybe financial reasons
Yeah.
because they can't.
Yeah.
Or yeah, so there's yes, no, that's we'll talk a little bit more about
Okay.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's literally right around the corner here. So
Yeah.
that'd be great. And there's a lot of folks that are here local. That will definitely Fleetwood Mac's definitely a great
Yeah.
tons of songs that are on there. So
Great.
all right, so we're live, Justin. All right, very cool. All right, so there it is. All right, so we'll go ahead and so we got our little monitor up there. We can watch some of the chat and comments come through, and so we'll go ahead and get started there. So, hello, all. This is Paul from Drums and Rums, where the backbeats meet the spirits. So today I'm joined by Rees Bridges. He is the drummer for the Dirty Vegas and a few other projects as well, which we'll get into. Don't want to give away too much here. Rees is from the UK, and so he's had a lot of education on schooling and a lot of, from what I was reading on doing my homework, trying to dig up on things.
Yeah.
Your kind of your background, your how you got into different projects and some of that. So we'll go ahead and just jump right in. So good afternoon, Rees. How you doing?
Good afternoon. Really good. Thank you for having me.
Yes, a another beautiful Florida day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like we say, we live in paradise. It's this week we had to put on, actually had to take the flip flops off.
Isn't that a strange thing when it happens?
Right. Yeah. So it's like we get cold every once in a while, and my kids were born here, so they're like, they have no idea what the cold is,
Right.
and what real cold is. So, but they were at least enjoyed that they got to at least experience some of it rather than sweating all the time.
Mm.
So, Rees, I guess we'll try to maybe talk through some of the chronological orders. But first, do you want to go ahead and just get a quick introduction? Yeah.
Yeah. My name is Rees Bridges. I'm originally from London in the UK. I've been a session drummer pretty much from when I left college, from the mid-90s onwards. And I was very lucky to have the opportunities to sort of play with some great artists that have been fairly successful, which kind of leads me to where I am today. It's whilst I was on tour with Tears for Fears, actually, I met my wife, who's a New Yorker, and she came to live with me in London for about 3 years, and we decided to then move back. Most of her family now are down here. Her parents live in Boynton Beach, which isn't too far from here, and now we live in Miami.
Okay.
And still, it's kind of changed over the years. It's not just all about playing sessions and playing live now, especially, with what's going on in the world. But
right.
I have other things that are to do with music and to help other musicians and artists out there now, which is a passion of mine.
No, that's great, and to be able to, I guess call it you give back or mentoring others that are coming through, which is great, because a lot of times new folks come in or into the industry business and just jump in, don't know, and it's
yes, and it's a business that's very different to when I started out.
Right.
Yeah,
and I know, I'm sure, like I said, streaming has become a big challenge or thing for artists to make some type of living on music making, or let alone a recent show. A friend of mine's Jams and Cocktails show. He had on a guest. I'm gonna forget her name, but she is writes music, and they talked a lot about how the writers are really getting less of a cut than even so, because of all this streaming, and has changed so much. So unless we're going to go back to terrestrial radio and 8 tracks and tapes and CDs in your cars, it's just the way it is now. So
it is, yes.
But yeah, so it's some fair thing. So, no, that's so back. So from the UK, from London, And so you got into drums at the age of 6 or so.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it depends who you ask.
Okay.
If my mother was here, she would say, "Oh, he started playing when he was 18 months old," you know. But I do remember getting my first real drum kit when I was I think it was for my 7th birthday.
Okay.
So before that, my uncles had a little setup which they'd sort of given to me, and I kind of completely destroyed it. But it was fun, and for some reason, you know, I come from a musical background. My father was a singer, and a fantastic one at that. And I remember just sitting on the stage, on the side of the stage whilst he was singing, and just looking at the drummer the whole time, you know, just being obsessed. And I would go and talk to them and help them pack away their stuff, and they would give me a pair of sticks. It would be the best thing in the world,
Right.
you know. And then, so after sort of trying to playing around with it, my parents put me into a sort of a military, like Army cadets kind of thing. There was a big military band there, and I started to, because I kind of already knew a little bit how to play, I was immediately put into the drum corps, you know, and you know, very small little kid, you know, with a, you know, what we called a sling to hold the drum, and I would have to have a big piece of sponge underneath it just so that it wouldn't kind of cut into my arm. But I really enjoyed that, and that was, now looking back at it, even though I probably didn't appreciate it at the time,
Right.
was a huge learning platform for me in terms of strict technique. I still play traditional grip these days, for the most part, you know. So technique, strict technique, stick drill, and just learning how to play a snare drum without even knowing the terms of, you know, I didn't really know what a snare drum rudiment was,
Right.
you know,
Okay.
back then, but I could play them. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was something that you had to really, buzz rolls and various things like that. You know, you had to really know how to do that stuff.
So you didn't know what they necessarily were or term,
Right.
but you can.
But you know, you would learn the stick drill and
Right.
the solos and various things.
It's like, oh wow,
that.
you can do that. It's like, oh, that's what it's called.
Yeah. Well, I remember
Yeah.
very clearly having to sort of stand in front of the drum major at one point when I was a little older, and there was a sort of a test that I had to go through, and he said to me, play a paradiddle, leading with the left hand. And I said, what's that? What's a paradiddle? As soon as he played it, I was like, oh, right, okay, that's fine. Yeah, could do that, no
Right.
problem. But yeah, it was a very kind of my technique and various things like that, and my playability was down before I really knew what I was doing. At an early age, so
Right.
that, now looking back at that, it was the best education in the world as a foundation, you know.
Right. There's quite a few other guests that I've had on, and that's one of the things that we were talking before we went live was the drum dojo, and a couple of the guys that were there had, and especially Jim was, you know, did drum corps in college or high school and built such a foundation of those control, stick control, and so forth, and because I think that's there's always the school of, well, you don't need education, you don't need to do drum this or that, but again, everyone can, like they say, some people can hear music and just play it, some people can't read music, and still, or vice versa. I guess I might get that messed up, but so
yeah, it's I certainly came from, because I was so young at the time. I mean, I'm talking about by the time I was 7, 8 years old, I was doing that. So, you know, still in what we call primary school in the UK, but going every Monday and Tuesday to the Army Cadets thing, and band practicing and marching up and down whilst playing and various things like that. Yeah.
So that's definitely a different way that you experience. You know, when kids are threatened by their parents that say, "We're going to send you to military school," it sounded like, well, this actually sounded pretty cool. Actually, to go to the military school and
I
play
mean,
the drums.
you know what? I think at the time, you know, I probably hated it, but I don't look back on it like that anymore. You know, because of what I did learn and not just musically, but other things that we had to do there, disciplines and various things like that. Yeah. Really good.
No, that's so from there. So where did that, I guess, end? Where did the schooling and transition to?
I kept that up until I had to. I kept it up for a long time, actually, because I became the sort of drum major and started to kind of teach other drummers within the drum corps what we did.
Okay.
So I was definitely a teenager by the time I sort of left.
Okay.
Probably to do with schoolwork at the time, the amount of homework and coming up for mock exams and stuff like that. But before that, my music teacher at school said to my parents pretty much maybe a year before I was due to go to secondary school. In the UK, we have primary and secondary school. You guys, I think, you have middle school and high school.
Right.
But so I think middle school and high school, if I'm correct, is what our secondary school together. So a year before that, the music teacher said it would be really good. She talked to my parents and said it'd be really good if Rees started to learn how to read music. So with that being said, my music teacher would sort of give me some private lessons, piano lessons and stuff like that. But my parents then got me a private drum tutor.
Okay.
Great guy by the name of Tim Saxby, who I think he had a military background as well. He was in the army band and stuff like that, but then he became a teacher and a session sort of drummer, really good drummer, great reader. So every Thursday after school, I would have to go home. And again, I remember hating the fact that I had these drum lessons, But I do look back on Tim now and just think, man, the guy was not only very talented drummer, but he really got me into reading music. And that was my entry into the Guildhall School of Music.
Okay.
Because, and I'm not sure whether you guys have this over here, but in the UK, even as far back as that, in the 80s, we had what we call drum grades.
Okay.
And the only place that the sort of governing body for these drum grades was the Guildhall in London. So you would have these books. Grade 1, 3, 5 and 7 were snare drum books, snare drum grades, and then 2, 4, 6 and 8 were drum kit. And so your drum teacher would take you through these books and these grades, so you could go and be tested and get your drum grade, get your certificate. I'm grade 4 or I'm grade 5, you know. So I remember the first time I was sort of introduced to this and learning how to read, going into the grades, and you would have to pick out that there would be like 8 pieces of music in the book, of which you would have to choose 2 to perform. And then there would be a snare drum rudiment section where there would probably be 5 rudiments that you had to play. There would be an audio exam where you would, they would sort of play a piece of music and you would have to play along to it. And then there would be like a show and tell kind of thing where the examiner would play something and you would then have to repeat it and explain exactly what that was.
Oh, wow.
So my first couple of exams going up to the Guildhall on campus in London, I remember my grandfather and my mother took me up there on the train. And again, this is probably 10, 11 years old. And, you're kind of looking around going, oh, this is very official, And I'd go into the exam room and have to perform these pieces. And this was before. Now you've got there's the Trinity College that does it as well. Now, luckily, the exams are more based on playing these pieces of music to a backing track.
Okay.
Back then, it was just you were sort of marked on how well you just read the piece of music and played the drum composition. So I would do this, and remember feeling really nervous, the first couple of times going up there. But then I remember distinctly at the point where the examiner had to play something on the snare drum, and I remember feeling fairly comforted by the fact that I was like, that was a complete mess. I just thought, you can't play drums, It was one of those kind of weird situations that kind of calmed me down at that point.
Right.
And luckily enough, I got distinction on those and had to move. The elder I got and going into secondary school, I would have to go back to the Guildhall to do these grades. And then because you're then recognized as going through the whole thing from an early age, you know, you were automatically sort of grandfathered in into,
Okay.
you know what I mean? So yeah, that was my sort of entry into the Guildhall School of Music.
Okay. So that's definitely gives you, obviously, like you said, your good foundation. Your, you know, maybe some of that military aspect is the discipline,
Right.
and a lot of things, maybe not just in your drum playing or other things, maybe in life, and you know, to kind of
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so from there, you started getting into, after you left the school and got into, so back in the 80s, 90s, kind of.
Yeah, mid-90s, started really wanting to become like a professional session musician, you
Right.
know. I'd been thinking about this and wanting to do it from an early age, and so I would play with as many different bands and artists that I could around London. I was lucky enough to be offered a teaching job back in my old secondary school first of all, but then a lot of the other sort of secondary schools in the borough of Greenwich, where I grew up, I sort of gradually got known and started to teach drums in those schools. So that was kind of cool because I was still my own boss. I still had my own time. It wasn't a 9 to 5 thing, you know.
Right.
You could go in, so I was earning money that way. I was earning money doing the session thing, and you know, just really trying to make a name for myself
Right.
around the London area and stuff like that. Yeah.
So that's on you know, one of the things, Reese, is where we were talking earlier was when this podcast started, and the idea, and just hit the rubber to the road, when again going back to, and again, I know if those who've listened to the podcast probably hear me going on and on about the same thing, but you know, again, I think it's a real I think a part I'd like to really kind of recognize of the guests is, you know, seeing that in Nashville, people hustling, you know, and those that are, you know, they might be in a band that's touring, but
Right.
it's not, not their only thing. You know,
Yeah.
there's many irons in the fire. And then obviously this year when COVID happened, if you were a one-trick person,
Yes.
you are dead in the water because you don't have other streams of, obviously, income or avenues to generate, you know, whether it's teaching sessions or many other things.
Absolutely,
So yeah, so
yeah.
that's good that you recognize very early on, it's just to get out there and cut your teeth and
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was probably more tunnel vision than anything else.
Okay.
You know, I remember just being at school. I mean, any of my school friends will tell you that all I used to think about and talk about was music and drums and the band and, you know, other bands that we were into and stuff like that. It
Right.
was just, you know, I was so blind to just everything else around me that I was convinced that if I just kind of wanted it enough, and I just, you know, I would go and practice 4 hours a day, and you know, practicing with bands and doing lots multi-genre work as well, which was really important to me. You know, I would, you know, later on during the sort of Dirty Vegas times and stuff like that, you'd be in the studio one day sort of doing electronic sampling and loops and stuff and programming, and then I'd go out that night and do a jazz gig, you know, which that's what I wanted. I never really wanted to be a part of just one thing.
Right.
You know, even though I was officially a part of bands in the past and stuff like that, I kind of knew that I would get bored too easy.
Right. Right.
So I just wanted to have a lot of fingers in a lot of pies, you know. And I guess that because of that, it meant that you were spreading yourself out to other opportunities,
Right.
rather than, oh, this is my band and this is the
it.
thing and I'm going to make it with them and that's
Right.
what I do, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's an interest. The approach everyone takes is obviously different, right? Those that are, I think, again, as I've always been typically a rock kind of person, has grown up, and you know, the influence of the time and my folks and the British invasion of the Beatles and Stones and so
Right.
forth. And the more I kind of started, as I got a little older, a little bit more open to certain things, you know.
Right.
I haven't gone down too far down a lot of the rabbit holes, but enough that it's like, oh, okay, I'm listening to this now, and okay, this is
Yeah.
kind of different. is if you don't stick to so much to a genre specific, either I want to be in music, I want to be making music as a musician, and this is it, or do I want to be famous
Right.
as a drummer in a band that and again, it's like a million bands out there, and to be able to hit it, which is a lot tougher, like we're saying today, compared to maybe back in the 80s or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a strange one when I think about back then. You didn't have the opportunity of releasing music yourself or recording stuff in your own bedroom on a laptop, or making a video with a phone and all that kind of stuff. So in a way, I like the fact that there's another way to do things these days. You know, if you're not that if you kind of realize that whole kind of thing of going out and gigging and hoping to be recognized by an A&R guy that happens to be in a club that wants to sign you up to a major record deal and all that, which was really the only way that, that's the reason why we kind of went out and gigged so much and, for no money and all those kind of things. It's because we wanted to just play in front of the right people. It was the only way to do it. Now, at least there's another way. So it may not actually earn you the money that, to live on anymore as 100%. But at least, you can do something else and just know that you're doing that to part finance your career in music, where you can still record an album, you can still record videos, you can still put it out there to people for live streaming purposes or whatever. You can still be open to making sure that, you may get a good publishing deal. You may get your songs put onto a piece of film or TV. There's all of these possibilities now that I think are just they're kind of much more in grasp now than they ever were.
True.
It's just you kind of got to relinquish that sort of idea of I'm going to be a professional musician or a pop star, and I'm going to earn a ton of money out of doing it.
Right.
So
that's a approach of musician first,
right,
band second.
Right.
Right.
I mean, my whole thing was I wanted to be a good drummer.
Right.
Let's start there, and that's the only thing I could control.
Right.
I mean, when you really think about it, the music industry, even back then, you have to come to rely on so many other people, so to do this and believe in you or believe in your band and do this when they say they're going to do it and stuff like that. The only thing that you can really control is yourself. So it has to start out, well, what do you really want to, what's the idea of success in your own mind? Is it fame and fortune? Well, if it is, then you really need to rethink some things.
Right.
But to just try and actually strive to be the best that you want to be at your chosen field. It doesn't even need to be music when you really think about it. But for me, it was all about drums. It was always about becoming a better musician. I actually started to learn a lot of other instruments, bass guitar and guitar and stuff like that, just because I wanted to understand those instruments more to become a better drummer.
Right.
So there was a lot of different things, and that is the only thing that I could control, and everything, every day I used to get up and rehearse and practice just with that in mind.
No, that's a great approach, and to hone the craft,
right,
and be the best what you can be, because then everything else will. Look, it will come. You will have and I think that's as we've gone through many things in your career and life. Is when one door closes, one opens.
Absolutely, and I think it's just as important these days as ever to be a really nice person, to be a good person, because you could be the best drummer in the world, but if you're excuse my language, an arse to deal with, people won't want to hire you or be around you. So you've got to be easygoing, you've got to be pleasant to deal with, you've got to be reliable, on time, and all these things. And if you have all of those qualities and you're good at what you do, then your name will naturally start to get around.
Right. People
will say, "Oh yeah, give Rees a call, give this person a call," and knowing that everyone, people are kind of always worried about recommending people, because if it doesn't turn out that well, it falls bad on them.
Right.
So they've got to be confident enough to know, definitely give this guy a call. You won't regret it.
Right.
So those qualities are just as important as actually being a good musician.
Yeah, that's because if you don't have that, get along easy enough, or
Right.
and then nobody wants. And then again, you could be the best guy in the world, and but just nobody wants to be around you, which is unfortunate.
Mm.
So as you've come through cutting your teeth there in London and different bands, and how did you meet up with? Because I think you were in a band with so this is pre Dirty Vegas. You were in a band together.
Yeah. It's funny. Just apart from doing the teaching thing, I got a part-time job in a drum store in the South London, because I wanted to also learn about, the different products that were out there, different cymbal lines, different drum lines, how people were setting their drums up, heads. What did they, what's the difference between double ply and single ply? What do they do? How do they sound different? All of these different things. So I got this part-time job, met a lot of great people. You get to meet a lot of great musicians and people passing through those places, One of the people that I met was Steve Smith, who was the singer of Dirty Vegas. At the time, he was a professional percussion player. He was like a session percussionist. So he would come in to, get his sticks and stuff like that. We used to chat and get on. One day he said to me, "Do you know of any drummers that are available? I've got my own thing going on, my own band that I'm sort of singing as well, and we're looking for a new drummer." It just so happened that one of my older projects had just kind of finished.
Right.
So I said, I might be interested, might be available.
Yeah, I might know a guy.
Yeah, exactly. I'll pass you his number, So we got together, and it was a band called Higher Ground at the time. Okay. It was sort of standard 5-piece band, keyboards, drums, bass, guitar, singer, and Steve would play some percussion and stuff like that. And that was a band that we kind of worked in. I guess it was from about 97, 98, something like that. We'd go and do some demos and some shows around London. We did some big shows, which culminated actually in supporting Paul Weller in a big festival in Crystal Palace in just outside of London. And it was a lot of the big bands. It was like one of those full-day things. There was Skunk Anansi was playing, Paul Weller, Ocean Colour Scene at the time, Morchiba, a lot of kind of big bands at the time, and we were one of the opening bands. So at this point we thought, we have made it. We're going and doing this thing in front of thousands of people, open air stadium show,
I've made it.
This is it, guys, this is it, And we did that show, but nothing really happened after that. We went and did an EP with a producer that produced the Stone Roses' Second Coming album, Mark Tolley, I think his name was. So we went up to where did we go? I think it was somewhere in the middle of England. We went up there to a big studio, did this EP, spent a lot of money on it, but it started to kind of fizzle out, and people were starting to get a little kind of frustrated about the fact that we'd done these. We worked with a big producer, we'd done these big shows and stuff, but the record companies were just not knocking on the door. So that kind of fizzled out.
And what style of music was that?
It was a little rocky, but it had some dance music and sort of slightly more kind of funky dance sort of stuff influenced in there as well.
Right.
But at this point, it was all very organic. There was no programming or anything. There was a keyboard player, but it was all live.
Right. Okay.
So that kind of fizzled out, which meant, and I think that at that point, I moved actually to Spain for a year. I had a job out there where I was just playing with a band. It was funny. It was like an hour every other night. I had to play in this band for something out in the south of Spain. And I was getting like a weekly wage, put up in a beautiful house right by the beach, so I took 1999 off. I went and did that, came back, and Steve was calling me before I was coming back saying, "Listen, I really want to do something again. I want to try and maybe do something a little more acoustic and as my sort of solo project." I was totally down for that, you know. So myself and him went into the studio. He wrote a bunch of new songs, and it involved a bass player as well, just as a trio. One of those songs happened to be Days Go By, out of those writing sessions. And funny enough, the song at that time wasn't anywhere near one of the better songs that he'd written for the album. Nowhere near. It was like right down there, you know. Didn't really think that much of it, you know. And we kind of did it. I've still got like a DAT tape demo of it. And we kind of did it like a bit of a Santana vibe. It's got a lot of percussion on it and stuff like that. And there is actually an acoustic version of that song on the B-side of the single, I think it is, and it's also a bonus track at the end of the first album. So that kind of gave you some indication of like where it came from.
Right. And I think the acoustic version, and I've a couple of friends of mine that are, like I said, soloists here. I said, check out this version of this song. I said, I think it'll be great, you know, cover to do live, you know, especially if they're acoustic in performance. But you know, so
it's a nice version, and that's definitely where that all sort of started, you know, and. So, and Dirty Vegas was always about that, by the way. Even though it sounds all kind of, you know, produced and DJ-esque and all that kind of stuff, it really started, every song started organically with Steve and an acoustic guitar. And then if it was a good song like that, then the production, you know, the two other guys, the DJ, Paul and Ben, the DJs, would kind of come in and put the production over the top, as long as it didn't get in the way of the initial quality of the song. That was, we always tried to make it so it was a good balance of that sort of organic and then the sort of digital, you know what I mean? So, so on top of that, you know, we had this thing that we were kind of going around doing Steve's acoustic stuff, and then he told me that he'd started to work with these other guys, these DJs and stuff like that, and I met one of them, Paul, first of all, because I was brought in to play a bit of guitar in a sort of another studio side project that they were doing together. And I guess one of the reasons why Steve kind of put Days Go By forward was because he didn't think it was a song that was that good that he wanted to retain out of the real kind of good ones that we thought were really. He would just kind of, we'll start off with this, you know. And but sure enough, I mean, they made it what it is today, what everyone knows, and you know, that pretty much, you know, out of us kind of going into a small studio in Bromley, and you know, putting together some stuff, and I had my V drums, you know, bring in the V drums and sort of play some loops, and we would mic up maybe a hi-hat. That's always how we've recorded drums, by the way. It's always been sort of the electronic stuff, but layered it with acoustic stuff that had been sampled and looped. You know, so you build up these kind of layers to the point where you suddenly get a drum performance out of a lot of different things going on. And from there, you know, we never expected, none of us ever expected that song to do what it did. You know, and the point where, you know, we're at the Grammys, and to even be nominated at that point was like, it's so early on as well, you know, it's the first single that ever got released for Dirty Vegas. And you're at the Grammys after the album's come out, and suddenly they announce that you've actually won one of them. And it's like, we're just a couple of guys from South London, you know, mucking around, and suddenly they're on stage accepting this award, and you're like, wow.
That's it. How things come about, right? And I remember, you know, that time frame, early 2000s, how much there was a good time for that house and club music, and you know, a lot of that sampling, and so did the video for it. Then that was about the same time when it got, because I mean, still back in that early 2000s, MTV was still playing videos, I think, at the time, right? And how that video was just kind of the right mix, and then also was also a lot more to the masses as well. Is the Mitsubishi commercial, right?
And I think that's the key right there. The fact that, You know, in a time where bands were and artists were very reluctant to actually give their songs to ads and stuff like that, the guys said, "Why not?"
Right.
You know, and that was the thing that really got it into the A-list playlists on the radio and stuff like that. So on that ad, it was a slightly kind of different sound that people perhaps hadn't heard of since, you know, Depeche Mode or whatever it was, that kind of electronic stuff that was in the mainstream in the 80s. And that meant that people were ringing up the radio stations to request the song, or at least ask what it was and who it's by. You know, it got played more, which meant that MTV played the video even more. You've got a very simple storyline of, you know, pretty much a guy outside a cafe on a piece of cardboard breakdancing, you know, and a damn good job he did of it too, you know. But, you know, everything was very simple. You know, the song is a very simple song. You know, the way that it's produced is really just a very simple, repetitive bass line that keeps going around, you know.
Just keep steady, right.
And you've got some breakdowns and some rise-ups and the song being sung over. So everything was very simple but very effective.
Right.
And I think a lot of people kind of get lost in, especially today, in overproduction, overthinking things, you know. It doesn't necessarily need to be that way. You know, you don't need to throw a bunch of money at something for it to be good and successful. If something comes easy, I especially like this in the studio these days, if something comes very natural and easy, just leave it alone and just, you know, kind of let it flow that way. And that's organically the way that it should be.
Right.
And I think that, you know, it's not always like that. You know, you can sit on songs for months, you know, but certainly with Days Go By, it came very easy. By the time it got given to Paul and Ben, the video came out really well. It got put into the right hands. The record companies then really started to work at it, you know, Parlophone in the UK and Capitol Records over here. And it all happened very quickly. That's the other, and it always seems to happen that way, you know. When it happens quickly.
It's like shit.
Before you've even known, you know. Yeah, it's just suddenly you're kind of playing in front of all the thousands of people, and you're kind of looking around, going, "How the hell did I get here?" You know. Yeah, but it was great.
Yeah, that's so like you said, you wake up one morning and you're you know, you're one nominated, and then you become a winner, and then playing to bigger crowds, and then, you know, very direct, then all of a sudden you know everything blows up, and and again, you know, it's a very catchy name too, you know, it's you know, okay, you know, Dirty Vegas, and you know, and that time frame. So then still then I guess we jump maybe ahead to today, right? They still put out something back in, was that?
Yeah.
Is it happening?
Well, with Dirty Vegas, yeah. I mean, it still exists.
Right.
Ben, the guitarist and one of the sort of producers, is no longer in the band. And it's really based around Steve Smith and Paul Harris, and they pretty much kind of just take the lead on everything. You know, we don't really go out and play live anymore, mainly because, you know, again, you know, it's Dirty Vegas really happened towards the end of the old music business.
Right.
You know, they did sign the big deal. They got the big advance. We got tour support. We were lucky enough to experience that, what we really kind of grew up knowing and wanting.
Right.
But we also then went through the transition of the music industry changing, and record companies just diminishing, A&R guys being fired, you know, which is something that happened. You know, the person that signed us, the A&R guy, got let go. We got reassigned a new guy, the guy that actually signed Coldplay, actually. And he really didn't like us. He kind of made it very plain one day that, you know, don't really like your music, wouldn't have signed you in the first place. You know, I think it was at a party or something, he was speaking to Paul Harris. And at that point, it prompted us to kind of go, all right, if we haven't got the record company on our side, what's the point in going on?
Right.
So it led for us to take quite a long sabbatical. You know, it kind of broke up, and then we came back a few years later to do the third album. But yeah, it still exists today.
Right.
Much smaller than it was back then. But they are releasing new music, and they're working on stuff back in London right now for hopefully some new releases next year. But over here now, you know, I've also got other things that I do.
Right.
I mean, I always did, you know.
Right.
Going back to that, wanting to always have a lot of fingers in a lot of pies. You know?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So the other projects, right? You did the Ordinary Boys.
Ordinary Boys,
Right.
which is a fantastic group of guys. I mean, as soon as I moved, I've been over here now for about 10 years, I think, and I found that every time that I was going to play, be it with Dirty Vegas or whatever, I was jumping on a plane and having to go somewhere. So I'd been looking for a local project for quite some time. Few false starts, and you know, really wasn't finding. You know, it's not London, and it's not LA, and it's not New York. You know, Miami is definitely its own thing.
Right.
And so it took a long time to find something, and I think it was a friend of mine that said to me one day, "Oh, there's a Smiths Morrissey tribute act. It's been going for a while, but they're looking for a new drummer." And I said, "What? The Smiths over here? How can that be? It's such an English band, you know."
Right.
I said, "Are you sure it's the Smiths?" Yeah, I'm sure. Give this guy a call, AJ. Sure enough, I called the guy up. They were looking for a guy. They liked the fact that I was English. They hadn't even heard, you know, "You're English? You're in," you know. But we went to do some rehearsals, and yeah, they'd sort of had a few personnel changes, and they'd been going a few years. It was a bit rough around the edges, but I could tell that there was something. The guy, the singer, AJ, you close your eyes and it sounds like Morrissey singing, you know. So I thought at that point, I'm in, you know. So we've been going now for, I think next year will be 10 years of the full project.
Oh wow!
Even though I've been in it for maybe 5 or 6, and it's just a lot of fun, You know, we go out of state, we do a lot of, we tour, we do a lot of shows, and we just have a lot of fun doing it. We meet so many great people who love, very passionate fans, you know, the Smiths and Morrissey fans.
Right, yeah.
So they love what we do, and I love the fact that it's like a world band. You know, we have a Cuban Morrissey, we have an English guy, we have an American bassist, we have an Israeli Jew on guitar, and we have a guy from Nicaragua on the other guitar. And he'll kill me for saying Nicaragua. I can never pronounce it right. Nicaragua, whatever it is. Sorry, Byron. But yeah, it's just, you know, people that have come together from different parts of the world that love the music. And we just play, and we have such a good time, you know.
That's great. And so just recently, and I had planned, I know when you and I initially spoke or were chatting, it was, I think, back in October. And then my day job, I knew you were playing here in West Palm, Respectables. I was planning to go, but I had to be out of town, and I said, he was right here in the backyard, you know, to get a chance to catch up with you in person before the podcast. So, and then, so you had mentioned that you just also recently just played an open air festival down in Miami too.
Yeah, we played a festival down there a few weeks ago called the Black Market Fest. So yeah, you know, it was nice. Now that, like I say, there are certain things that are starting to trickle in for the live work. We'd been doing some live streams, and you know, I've been keeping up with my sort of studio session stuff that I do, but as far as live, it's starting to trickle in now.
Right.
Those were since March. We were kind of in mid-tour and woke up in Savannah, I think it was, just to be told, "That's it, pack up, we're all going home."
Right.
You know. So at that point, that was the last thing, and then the Palm Beach gig, which was at the beginning of November, and a couple of weeks ago the Black Market Fest.
Right.
Yeah.
So is that, and that's all pure? There's no obviously any electronica or as much as more traditional.
Well, it is more traditional, but
Yeah.
we do use Ableton. Ableton Live, which is a program that in fact, Dirty Vegas, I think I'm right in fact that Dirty Vegas was the first band to beta test Ableton Live when it first came out for live music.
Okay.
And without going into too much detail, you know, before that program came out, if you were using sort of backing tracks or samplers or sequencers, you would either use a computer sequencer, or you would use like a multi-track recorder, like a 16-track thing running on stage.
Right.
And even before that, people would use tape machines off the side of the stage to, you know, play all the keyboard parts and everything. Now you can use this thing called Ableton Live, which is stemming out all of the parts from the studio, putting it into this computer. You have all your set in one go, and then you have all of your parts sort of stemmed out, which means that you can still mix them, but you don't have to go from sort of song to song, like reload a song when you're starting a new song.
Okay.
So there's part of the set that's completely live, and there's part of the set that we use, because we don't have a keyboard player, so it takes care of all the sort of keyboard stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had my own little trying to play to a backing track, and with a friend of mine, and he is a local rapper here, and he had his track that he usually does. It performs solo. And so it's, you know, when you're by yourself, I'm sure there's a lot more simplicity, and then when, you know, other ingredients, and there was the track still had the drum or part to it, and here I'm trying to play, and I'm like, if I can't hear this, you know, there was no monitors for me, and I said, I gotta have something to you know, make sure I'm keeping up with it, and so it's
I mean,
it's interesting.
Ever since the sort of 90s, doing even pre Dirty Vegas and stuff, in-ear monitors with click tracks were my thing.
Right.
You know, playing with sequencers and to a click live, or even in the studio, you know, was always something that I was called upon to do, because I could just go in and
boom,
you know, which like I say, even today, you know, if you really want to bring a lot of that sort of production element from albums and recordings into your live world, that's really the only way to do it. You know, you could have 5 keyboard players in the background doing all these layers, but you know, to actually bring what sounds like the production of the record into that live, you know, it means that you're kind of taking yourself from a pub band to a real live band, you know, just bringing all of that stuff in, making sure that you're playing, you know, you've got your click track, you're playing along to it, you know the arrangements of the songs, and that's 90% of what a lot of sort of professional drummers in the kind of pop and rock field these days are doing. You know,
because that's what I'm sure most people want to hear is almost what they've bought.
Yeah,
the music, and then they're like, you know, a lot of times this doesn't sound like the, you know, or it's been so produced, like you said, keep it simple, that there's no way to replicate it live. Or like my last guest, he had mentioned that they'd layered many percussion tracks and different congas and things, and then it was to that point, it was like, shit, how am I supposed to play this live? I'm only one person.
Exactly.
You know? And so he came up with some improvisational ways to kind of get through it. And he was percussion player, educated in marimba and mallet, so he was able to play with 3 drumsticks or something. Anyway, so there's video of him playing. But yeah, to your part is it's how do you transition going from studio to live and then to hear that product. So what other projects are you working on musically then?
There's something new that's just come up, which is a band called Crystal Visions.
Okay.
They're a local Fleetwood Mac tribute band. Again, I think the band has actually been going for many years, but they've been without a drummer now. I think it's probably since March, but it didn't really matter because there was nothing going on.
Right.
But I got a call from a couple of the guys there saying, would you be up for doing some of this stuff? We do have some shows starting in mid-February. First one being at Abacoa. I think it's on the 13th of February.
Okay.
would you, like to maybe kind of come into some rehearsals and see how it goes?
That'd be great. Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of my time at the moment is spent listening to Fleetwood Mac songs, and it's funny because you think I've been listening to Fleetwood Mac for years, and you think, oh, I know that stuff, but then when you actually really sit down and you're kind of thinking, all right, well, I have to now, maybe
really
write some of this out
a little bit.
You're like, maybe I didn't really know it as much as I thought I did.
Right. You probably songs that have been around for many decades. You're like, oh yeah, I can. Well, yeah, you're a professional musician that you're not just going to fake it and just kind of you wing it and so forth. Right. You can do your homework and get those parts.
Yeah.
But no, that would I'd definitely take you up on that. That'd be great. And the location here in Jupiter in the Abacoa, the amphitheater in the downtown area draws great crowds, and like I said, it's one of those. I sometimes watch these concert series on DirecTV channel, and it's like, oh yeah, Foreigner, and then they're just busting out. It's like they gotten back together, and you're like, yeah, that song and that song, and they're like, yeah, I forgot how many great songs. They're playing all their hits and something, and or I think there was Toto had performed, and you're like, oh, and so of course my kids were waiting for the end. They were asking, because of I'm drawing a blank now. Weezer covering Africa. It's been on the radio, and obviously there's a whole new generation that learned about that song, and they said, oh, when are they going? It's like, that song's not going to be to the end of the show. I'll call you in about an hour when that comes on, because everyone's waiting for that song.
That one and Rosanna.
Yes, the shuffles. So for sure. Definitely we'll check it out. We'll talk a little bit more here before we wrap up. Make sure we talk and plug that show coming up here in February. So as how do you approach drumming in a genre that was going back to the Dirty Vegas music that's traditionally approaching drumming that's traditionally programmed as being more of a traditional player, but then going into more of the electronic and programmed?
Good question. There was very much a sort of a time where I had to sort of reverse engineer quite a lot of stuff. And it meant obviously listening to the parts that that are on the records and stuff like that, and knowing full well that a lot of those, there was a lot of layers obviously that were still in the sequence, including a lot of drum loops.
Mm-hmm.
So the main thing was, well, how am I going to fit into all this playing live?
Right.
And what am I going to use? That was one of the main things. The setup that I used, the live setup that I used for Dirty Vegas, very small drums. Apart from the bass drum would be sort of a big sort of 22 by 20, something that was just kicking out a lot,
punching.
But the snare drums would be a 12 by 7 and a 10 by 5 on the side, really kind of high-pitched sort of cracked snare drums, and then there would be an 8 and 10 on the top, and my floor toms would be hanging 12 and 14. So real small, tight, not a lot of resonance going out or anything.
Right.
Everything was really ding, ding, very sort of
compact,
tight. And then there would be 3 different sets of hi-hats, but again small, like 12s as my main. There'll be a set of 10s over here. There might be another little sort of trashy kind of china on top of something, no ride cymbal, and then there would just be kind of splashes and crashes and effect cymbals. So I was trying to mimic something that really did sort of complement the electronic sounds that were kind of coming out in a sonic way, and I couldn't really kind of come in with big drums and really kind of overpower all the little blippy sort of things that were going in. So I really needed to sort of fit in with all of that stuff and just be very tight. I mean, your playing needs to be almost like a drum machine,
Right.
You obviously put a little bit of groove into it, but knowing that you're playing along to loops and stuff like that, you're playing to something rather than everything else playing to you. another really kind of weird thing that starts
right.
to happen. If you're a traditional drummer that have been playing in live bands for years,
and you've been told everybody follows the drummer,
right? The drummer's
right.
marking the time, you know, and everyone's playing to you. Well, that's not the case anymore. You know, it's what's going on electronically that is the master, and then you're slaving off of that and making sure that you are just playing to that stuff. So yeah, that's a different discipline that took a little bit of getting used to, just finding where I sort of fit in with that, and making sure that not only am I sort of tight to everything,
right,
but I'm not overpowering, I'm not underneath, and I'm not right over the top. I'm sort of somewhere in the middle. So yeah, again, took a bit of time to kind of get used to that. And I remember the first rehearsals going in and really sort of trying to work all of that stuff out. And it really didn't I really felt like it didn't really happen until sort of midway through the first tour.
Okay.
That's when I kind of felt, all right, now I know,
where you fit.
Yeah, I'd recorded a few of the shows on mini disc. There's a blast from the past. On a portable mini disc player, you know, we put it through the desk, and so I could listen back to what was going on, and I could tell what I was doing wrong, and places where I might have been overplaying a little bit, or
right.
you know, and I always say to any of the bands, you know, you can rehearse for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, but it's not until you actually get out on the road and you're playing this stuff properly in front of people where it really
comes together,
become match fit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So is that like, have you ever played with another drummer or percussion in a project where, you know, you see some of these bands, you know, like we were talking about there, the Toto, where they've got a percussionist specific, and then you've got a kit player, or, you know, other bands have got two drum kit players. How do you
work all of that out?
Right, yeah.
I've never played with two drummers. I have played with percussionists, Steve Smith being one of them, but I also had a brief stint doing a little Miami Sound Machine charity thing.
Okay.
And I remember feeling very sort of out of my depth, you know, when like the percussion, I think it was two percussionists came along. One of them was Stevie Wonder's percussion player. One of them had been in Miami Sound Machine, you know, these kind of Latino guys. And, you know, I'm there from England. They're like, well, where's your cowbell? And how are you playing that clave pattern? And I'm like, whoa, I am so out of my depth right now. But it was great. You know, it was fun. It was fun to do that stuff.
So with the electronic as a programmer, do you think it's required that somebody, and this is kind of interesting because, like you said, the technology is now totally given folks the ability to not even know how to actually play a traditional instrument, but now, because I think that there's quite a few big names that I think are all programmed that produce some really, you know, great music,
right,
without actually having to ever know how to play that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, I think that for a lot of the kind of music today, you listen to the way that the drums are being programmed and stuff like that. And for me as a producer, you kind of got to take a step away from being a drummer. You kind of got to just ignore that for a little bit, and because it can get in the way sometimes if you're trying to sort of program up some drums and stuff like that for a pop song that sounds like, I don't know, like Taylor Swift or whatever today, you know. You gotta just step away from the kit and just sort of try and do that. It's not, you don't have to kind of put the human touch onto it too much, and you don't have to think about dynamics too much. It's a completely different thing. It's not something that I particularly like to do,
right?
But I have had to do that, where, you know, I'm sort of too much in my head, thinking about the drums too much, and you have to just kind of stop yourself and kind of go, all right, hang on a minute, that's not what this is about. This is about something else.
Right.
And there have been times where I've started to produce songs with one of the other things I do down here called D-Sus, which again, we are now starting to kind of get the same kind of hybrid sort of sound like we did with Dirty Vegas, where we want to have a lot of that organic sort of songwriting kind of acoustic stuff, but produce it with a bit more of the electronic up-to-date kind of thing. But I started doing it where, you know, I would program up a lot of the drums and the loops and stuff like that, and then go into the studio and start playing over the top. And even though that was a really good way of doing something live, it really wasn't working in the studio. It's just to try and kind of massage everything into place and to get it sounding like it was a sort of a modern sound.
Right.
You know, it just kind of wasn't working for me. So the last couple of tracks, I've just ignored that completely and just programmed the drums up, and it's easier to do in a way. And it just gives you that kind of sound, that sonic sound that you're looking for in a pop song.
Right.
You know.
And I think that it's, you know, I've seen comments and, you know, the back and forth with, you know, and again, it's, you know, everyone's kind of sees each other better or whatever, where, you know, well, these, you know, musicians that may not play their music, but it's they've created music,
right? Not
from traditional instruments, or at least they were derived or created from, but they just know what sounds good, right? So if a kid that's got GarageBand on his iPhone or computer, and they're just knowing how to kind of, okay, I like that and I like this and and they're like, and it's almost no different than, you know, maybe it's a little bit different, but like, you know, a keyboard, you do have to know how to play, but still you've got sounds that you're and certain patterns and certain, you know, the foundation's still there, I guess, is really the point.
Yeah, it is kind of. I still think that you can listen to a song that's been made in that way and know there's no depth there for me. You know, if it's just a song that's been sort of programmed up on a computer and someone sung over the top or whatever, there's just something that's not there that you as a human being you relate to. You know, you latch on to. So you know, I am still very much a fan of people that are just going in, they know how to play their instruments, and they write songs, at least write songs in that way. Sit down at the piano, write the song. Sit down with a guitar, write the song. What you do with it after that, if it's a good song, what you do with it after that should only enhance it. Production can start to sort of get in the way of a song, but there's also this thing of a lot of production techniques at the moment seem to be put into songs that are actually bad songs at the beginning. You know, they're polishing a turd, as I call it. You know, they're trying to put a sparkle on something that's a bad idea in the first place.
Right.
And they're trying to let technology take over and kind of mask what's already there. And I can see through that thin veil, or, you know, and I hope a lot of other people can too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot on radio, though. That's the thing.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. You got to wade through the, you know, same as everything else. You know, there's still some great music, new music being made, but there's also some real bad stuff. The downside of the fact that everyone can go in and release whatever they want whenever they want is that you have to wade through quite a lot of the rubbish out there to get to the good stuff. But if you're willing to put in the work, I think it's still rewarding.
So what's your thoughts on, and I know there's a little bit of mix of, I think there's both things, like something like Billie Eilish, and her and her brother, you know, did a lot of that, created that whole I don't know, whatever you call it nowadays, CD or release.
Right.
You know, where it was just the two of them and program. But I thought her brother Phineas had played some instruments, though.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I think he's a good. You know, he does play piano, and it's not really something that I like. I've listened to it, and I can't. It's not really my thing.
Right.
But I can kind of appreciate it for what it is. You know, there's obviously, you know, there's definitely an audience there for it. They're very popular. She's very popular, but and I think that I can kind of tell that you know, everything is sort of started with that kind of minimalistic chord structure. Let's put a song together in that way, rather than going into the studio and just let's see what this synth does. Oh, that's a good arpeggiated sound.
Right.
Well, can
I have
we
no
write
idea.
a song over this?
Yeah, I have no idea what it is.
Yeah,
but, right, yeah.
I think it starts with that
Yeah.
organic form first
Right.
of all, and then they,
Yeah, and there's a I know for me, Reese, is I think it goes for any style of music is the beat, the that drive, that rhythm, whether it's rock, whether it's country, whether it's rap, R&B, if there's some stuff that I I don't want to say embarrassed to like or admit or whatever, but it's like, all right, that tune that blew up for her, was like, all right, that's pretty catchy. Again, it's music wise. The lyrics, half time is I may not listen to the lyrics, and maybe I'm not an in-depth person and so forth. But it's like, or other music that may not like certain, maybe like rap music is certain what the song or the lyrics are about, but like
there's something that catches you, and
right, anything that Dr. Dre is producing for rappers, like, all right, not sure, well, I kind of down on, probably don't associate or kind of can
relate to the theme or something.
You, right. But okay, but this is great,
right.
And the music is turn that bass up, and and so forth.
And I think being a musician in yourself, you do kind of get to realize when a good song is just a good song.
Right.
It doesn't have to. You don't have to think about the genre. Oh, I don't like country, or I don't. Whatever it is. It's just from a musician's point of view. It's music, and a good song or a good tune is a good tune.
Right.
Yeah.
And
we can appreciate that.
Yeah. That's so the So do you still perform with Head Candy?
No, that was a long time ago. But fun, it was one of those things that I was doing. Again, it was because I was working with Dirty Vegas in that kind of genre, that dance music genre. And Steve and I, even before that, we would, part of his thing as a percussion player, even in the 90s, it was the start of the big clubs like the Ministry of Sound and stuff like that, employing live percussionists to come in and play with DJs. So he would go and do that, and then sometimes when he couldn't make it, he would say, do you want to do it? So then I would go and, grab his congas and stuff and go and play in these clubs. I can't even remember the year that this happened, but I was approached by one of the Head Candy guys saying, would you like to come in and play with some of the DJs and stuff with the Head Candy nights? And I said, well, at that point, I said, I wouldn't be into playing percussion, but I would certainly love to think about how I can incorporate my tour setup, my Dirty Vegas setup, which was sort of built specifically for playing that kind of music with triggers and electronic triggers and stuff, and actually bring that into the club with a DJ, and that would sound like a lot of fun to me,
Right.
So I did that for a while, and we did some amazing shows, Hong Kong, and we did a great Head Candy night in Hong Kong, which I still remember as being probably the best one I did. Singapore, bunch of stuff in London, and generally it was kind of cool to do that. Weird the fact that you're just there on your own. From a drummer's point of view, you're always just used to being in with a band or something like that. You go into these clubs and it's just you and all your gear, and you're like sitting there whilst everyone's getting drunk, and and you're as sober as a judge, just sort of sitting there going, wow, man, this is just weird to be in this situation.
It's the best seat. You're watching all this go on.
Just watching it all go on sober, thinking, oh my God, is this what really happens in these places? But and then the other problem that I was faced with some of that is the DJs. There would be some DJs that would be very welcoming for you to come along and play along to whatever they were doing, but there would be some DJs that just didn't want you getting in the way at all, and they didn't like the fact that they were
because they were the
thing,
right?
And someone else is there sort of playing over the top of whatever they're spinning, and there were some that really liked it and some that just didn't want to know.
Right.
So unfortunately, the ones that didn't want to know made it very, plain, and it meant that the night was just never that great. They didn't want to work as a team,
right?
But it was okay. It was a
Right.
good time up to a point.
So would you think then? Again, this is the plug for try to since I don't play guitar and is can do you think percussionists, drummers, or we'll just use the broad term percussionists could sing, could actually be a one man band or soloist that would have enough keep an audience like a solo singer guitarist could do for 3 hours. I mean, so whether it's a little bit of electric, you got a little bit of the triggers, a little bit of sample, or something to that effect.
Yeah. I mean, I think that yes. I think it could be possible. You
Right.
could have someone if and again, what I'm trying to do here is almost put a DJ hat on rather than a drummer's hat.
Right.
So
Right.
if you're thinking along the lines of just having like an SPD sampling pad with a bunch of triggers, where you're triggering a whole bunch of, whatever you want to call it, backing tracks, samples, movements, whatever it is, you're then kind of using the triggers and the drums, and then you can do some live vocal over the top of that. Absolutely. I think that if there's a DJ out there that can kind of spin some records and hold an audience for 2 or 3 hours, a live musician that's kind of half DJ, half musician with some drums, using triggers to sort of do the DJ part of it,
Right.
and then being able to sing over the top in certain parts and various things like that. Absolutely, that
Yeah.
could happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So there we go. All right, singers and guitar soloists, us percussionists are coming for those solo gigs.
Yeah.
And that kind of what I was just mentioning that watching you kind of was like going to see Blue Man.
Mm-hmm.
It's like so there's so much going on. I know they're not the main drummers. Some of the guys behind
Right.
there, but it's just very much a very drum
Yeah.
band kind of performance.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
With a lot of dancing as well, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, so a lot
That's
of
the only downside with what we would do, because we're just planted in one spot.
Right.
One spot. There's no moving around or anything. It's just you're there, and yeah.
So so are you familiar with Jamtronica?
Jamtronica, no.
Yeah. So it's they've got it like I saw a band here in Jupiter, and they were like a 4-piece band, and they fuse electronics in kind of like a jam band kind of style. I don't know if on the chat there if some Kirk was on there. So yeah, he had asked, was interested in a question about Jamtronic, because I don't know if Case Cecilia, if you're watching there, we'll see here in a second. Maybe we'll come back to it, but so it's kind of like taking a traditional band and kind of adding some of the additional electronics to it. But there was a band that we saw, it was an interesting one called Broccoli Samurai. That's the name of the band.
Wow.
We went one night and we were checking out some music in a couple places here in Jupiter and bar hopping, and me and my sidekick there, Kirk, we were like, oh, well, who's playing, at Guamanas? And it was Broccoli Samurai. All right, well, the name alone, is worth checking out. Yeah,
I'm intrigued.
Yes, exactly. And we were just totally into the whole night. And there's another band, they're out of Fort Lauderdale, it's the Heavy Pets.
Right.
So they're also doing some Jamtronica, electronica. So maybe we'll come back to that instead. So we got a question here in the chat. Rees, what kind of acoustic kit do you use? Favorite cymbals?
Okay. Hi, Justin. I've been with Mapex now. When did I sign with Mapex? 2006, I think it was.
Okay.
Just at the NAMM show after I did the first World's Fastest Drummer thing. Before that, I was with Gretsch and Sabian for the most part, but I'd been it was a strange one because they're obviously two big companies, and the reason why we usually go with those companies is because of the level of tour support they're able to offer. God forbid something happens to your drums whilst you're in God knows where.
Right.
You know, you need a big company to make sure that they can handle whatever it is. And believe me, I've had drum techs leave half of a drum kit in a venue to wake up the next morning when we're sort of God knows where. And Rees, you've got half a drum kit for tonight. You know. This has actually happened, you know. So thank
That
God.
sounds so Spinal Tap-ish.
Right, exactly. You wouldn't believe the things that go on the road. But but the problem was, after I did the World's Fastest Drummer thing, I remember going up to my sort of artist relations guy and sort of saying, "Oh, you know that World's Fastest Drummer thing? I just won it." He was like, "Oh, great, fantastic. Anyway, Dave Weckl." You know, or whoever else was, always looking after the big cats.
Right.
And I certainly felt like I was sort of being left behind a little bit. So, at the same time, one of my very dear friends, Duncan Williams, who I'd been working with in the drum store back in the 90s, he'd made his way up into Korg, UK, to be their sort of drum director, and they were distributing Mapex drums at the time, and they'd just brought in Paiste cymbals. And he said to me on the show, "Rees, come on, what's it going to take for you to come over to Mapex?" And at the time, I didn't know anything about Mapex drums. But I kind of said, well, I could be persuaded, maybe, you know. So we set up some meetings, and they invited me up to Milton Keynes, where their offices were, to go through the whole line of drums and sort of really talk about, just educate me on what was going on with the company. And then they brought me into this huge warehouse full of tons of Paiste cymbals. I was like, oh, okay, well, yes, we definitely need to talk about a few things. So I signed with them, 2006, Paiste cymbals, same time, and I'd been with Vic Firth sticks and Remo heads and Gibraltar for their racks and their rock and sock stalls previously, and just as luck would have it, Korg UK at the time were then just about to take over the distribution for Vic Firth and Remo. So I kind of had everything in-house under one roof, you know, which was great.
Right.
And when I moved to the US, they were very helpful in making sure that they introduced me to everyone on the US side of things for Mapex and everything. So the transition was easy. And I've had a great relationship with Mapex over the time. Right. All of their drums, from the things that I had then, which would have been Saturn III and Orion, right up to date now with the new Design Labs snares and drums, and even the cheaper thing, they just gave me one of these new Mars Birch kits that have just come out, and I've got that set up in the Ordinary Boys studio. Just, it's constantly there. But as a kit, you know, I've just, going back to my whole kind of Yamaha 9000 Birch days, I've put some pinstripes on that thing, and it sounds amazing. It's just lovely, you know. So right across the line, you know,
right.
Very happy with the drums. I mean, what more can I say about Paiste cymbals? I mean, they're just incredible. So yeah, I don't see myself changing up anytime soon. Yeah.
So all right. So Disco Biscuits. All right. Well, I'm not sure. So all right. Well, I guess we'll come back. So Kirk, if you're listening, and the YouTube, there is the question was trying to recall the aspect of Jamtronica for the Broccoli Samurai band that we saw. So, but all right, I guess we'll come back to it. So, all right, before we go further, Rees, I guess you know, I think our little glasses
we're a little dry,
little low there. So give me a second here. I'll ask you, and then I'll go ahead and fill you up. So,
okay.
So you mentioned the fastest drummer competition there. So let's, you know, what I guess how'd that come about, and I guess what certain technique or practice are you like, you know, in Rocky IV, you go to Russia and Siberia and you're just, you know, shedding like crazy, or
Okay, so World's Fastest Drummer, I was actually at the NAMM show in LA, in Anaheim. What year was this? 2006. And I was there for a completely different reason. But I went past this area where there was sort of like a made-up boxing ring, and there was a pad connected to a meter in the middle, and a couple of guys that were dressed up as sort of, what do you call it, umpires or whatever, with the stripy shirts and stuff. And there are these drummers that are just getting up and just going at it, hell for leather, these single stroke rolls. And, went over to one of the guys and said, "What is this?" And they said, "Oh, this is the world's fastest drummer competition." And I said, "Oh, wow, can anyone get up and go?" And they said, "Yeah, if you want to, you just put your name down over there. And when your time is there," and I said, "Well, how does it work?" And they explained to me that it's a single stroke roll that you have to do in 60 seconds. And you have to do a single stroke roll. You have people literally looking at you from either side of you. And it counts the amount of strokes that you do as the clock goes down. And that's your result. Interesting. Okay, let me go and grab a pair of sticks. I went to Vic Firth. I said, "Guys, I want to do the, they knew me." I said, I didn't bring any sticks with me. Have you got a spare set of, I used the Buddy Rich signature stick. "Yeah, sure." They got me a pair of sticks out. Right, okay. Went back there, put my name down, kind of did a bit of warm up. People used to say, "I've got fast hands." So I thought, okay, let's see how fast they actually are. And so I went up there. And again, I'm still playing traditional grip here. This is, just as I would normally play on the drums. And I start going, and I think that I got around, the first time I did it, I got around sort of 800, mid 800s or something like that, nowhere near. So I kept looking at some of the other guys, and sure enough, they're attacking this thing as if they're just playing a snare drum or a practice pad, and therefore everything at the start was great. But about 30 seconds in, you could tell that they were sweating and their muscles were burning and everything was just kind of locking up, And there was an older guy there that I think had kind of got the record at one point, a drummer by the name of Art Verdi. And he'd kind of seen what I did, and he sort of took me aside and sort of said, "Listen, your technique is great. Here's how you can break 1,000. Because I think that you're going to be able to do it. Out of everyone that I've seen, I think that you could, if you do this, you might actually be able to do it." So he told me that, really, and it makes so much sense now, this is nothing to do with playing a drum kit, which means that you have to bring your whole technique and minimize it down so that your stroke length is about 1/4 of an inch off of the pad. If you can get your, practice for a little bit, I went and practiced for about half an hour just trying to do these tiny little strokes. And it meant that you can conserve your energy because you're literally using such a small muscle mass that you could just do it all. You could be reading the paper and it's almost like a controlled nerve twitch. Mm-hmm. And it meant that you could play much faster for longer periods of time and just keep it going constantly. So he said, go over there with the practice pad, half an hour, just get that muscle memory to try and just lock into that size of beat, Sure enough, went in there, okay. Yeah, I feel good. I think I might be able to do this. Not the second time, but maybe the third or fourth time I went up there. And I broke 1,000. I think I got 1,002, which put me into the competition. Because the top 10 people over the time of the whole show on the last day, on the Sunday, would go outside and there was this whole sort of competition thing. So I'm just sort of having fun, I'm like, this is great. I'm doing my other things and going up there, still practicing. I'm seeing my girlfriend who was living in LA, now my wife, but living in LA at the time. So I would drive in on the Sunday. This was the thing, So I got up there, they gave me a t-shirt to wear, got my sticks, started practicing a bit, and they did the foot competition first. So it was a whole double pedal competition. They got that done. Then it was the top 10 people, and I was the second from last to go on. So they had all of these guys go on, and they were kind of averaging around sort of 8, 9, maybe a little bit more. So I thought, I think I might be in with a chance here. But there was this one guy, Matt, I think his name was, a young kid who had been sort of doing the world's fastest drummer thing for a while, and he was the favourite to win. And he was the last person to go. He was going to go after me because they thought, well, he's definitely going to win. It's going to be a big finish. So I went on, you know, and luckily because I'd been a drummer that had been playing, you know, fairly big shows and stuff like that, the one advantage I had on my side was I just wasn't nervous. You know, it was just like a stage. There was people sort of there, an audience. But I think there was a lot of the younger guys and stuff like that kind of got up on the stage and kind of went, "Oh my God," you know. I didn't know I was going to be sort of
in front of everybody.
So, and that I think that affected them. So I went up, just sort of calmed down, went into it, and I got my best yet at that point, which I think was 1,006 or 1,007, something like that. So I thought, oh wow, okay, that was fun, you know, good for me. Matt went up. He thought he was going to sort of beat it, but he didn't. He got like 1,005 or something like that. There was only a couple of beats in it.
Wow.
So that was the first time that I sort of, you know, won that. It was I was the first European to ever win it. And the thing that I didn't realize at the time is they said, oh, well, you know, where do you want the prizes? And because they one of the things they had to work out was the fact that I was still living in London at the time, so they had to ship all this stuff from America to London. And I said, well, what did I win? And they said, well, you won like $12,000 in prizes. There's a Pearl drum kit, a whole range of cymbals, a year's supply of Remo heads and sticks. And I was like, you're joking. So sure enough, they had to kind of, you know, I get phone calls. Well, what heads do you want? What sticks do you use? Okay. So in a few weeks, all of this stuff came to my door, you know, boxes, which was fabulous, you know. And then I went, you know, I got a phone call from the person that was doing the London drum show that year and wanted me to come and do it there.
Right.
And then I went back to NAMM the next year and then the London drum show again. But it is really, the technique, as I say, is like a very tiny nerve twitch. You really have to just sort of shake but control, you know, you're literally there. You could be reading the newspaper and just sort of shaking around as if you have like nervous leg syndrome or something like that. And that's pretty much the technique. So it's nothing really to do with apart from the fact that I'm holding the sticks in the same way.
Right.
It's nothing that I would ever use to apply to the drum kit.
Right.
And that was the reason why I ended up getting out of it in the end, because I turned up to one of the shows in London and this thing had been getting bigger and bigger, more popular, you know. And this kid came along and he'd made this weird sort of chain with a sign saying "World's Fastest Drummer" on it. I was like, okay, that's weird. I guess I had a bad day that day, and I really wasn't on it. And this guy, actually a couple of the guys, beat me completely. But then later on, I saw them playing a drum kit, and they couldn't play. So they'd spent all of this time just sort of doing this thing on a pad, but their actual musicality and their ability on the drum kit was just non-existent.
They weren't able to transfer it to...
Right. They thought it was a game where, I could become the world's... You know,
right.
I'm not a drummer, but I'm just doing this thing, you know. And at that point, I said, well, this isn't about...
Right.
It was barely about music in the first place, or drumming, but now it's just kids just sort of doing that and not really being a drummer, and I'm out.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So
I got another question here from Justin. How do you maintain a good snap while reducing your distance from stick to drum?
How do I maintain a good snap whilst reducing your distance from stick to drum? Well, if you're talking about the world's fastest drummer technique, you don't need a good snap. That's at the end of the day, you're not playing drums and you're not playing music. This is just a practice pad that's linked up to an electronic meter. So the only thing that you need to do is touch the pad. Doesn't matter how it sounds, or you just got to make sure that it's one touch and it's one hand after the other as fast as possible. Whatever it sounds like doesn't really matter. So again, that's you're taking away the musicality aspect of it and stuff, and you're just thinking about how can I just touch this pad as quickly as possible for it to count on the
right.
So nothing to do with the sound at all. I'm hoping that's what you mean.
Yeah. All right. Maybe we'll come back to. We'll clarify if that suffices. So, as you've talked, Reese, again, there's the many irons in the fire. You keep them busy. Motivation, a lot of things, and so forth. I think something that I was reading up, found an interesting area here as we talked a little bit about that mentoring, kind of giving back, and so forth. Is your work at the Institute of Financial Wellness? You're the VP of Artist Relations.
Yes.
There at the IFWA. What exactly is that?
Okay. Bit of a backstory, I guess. When I started to actually become a little successful and start to make some real money in this industry, I found that I didn't really have a resource to, like someone to talk to in order to sort of know what to do with it. The same as you have, like, if you're in corporate America, you have a human resources department that you can go to.
Right.
They can talk about you signing up for the 401k,
Right.
what the match is, the insurances that you have.
It's a good thing that there's no HR department in being a touring band, because I'm sure the sexual harassments and they'd probably be pretty busy.
Yeah. But at least, like I say, there's that person that you can go to in order to figure out, maybe a way of like how to reduce taxes and what you're going to do for your retirement and various things like that. And what I noticed as well was, if you were actually signed to the record label and you signed that contract, you were assigned like an advisor, an accountant that would kind of look after all the money that was coming in from the record company and how it's being distributed to you and stuff like that. But I also then realized that they were actually employed by the record company and had the record company's best interests at heart,
right,
rather than the artist. Fast forward, when I came here, my two brother-in-laws, one of which has been in the financial industry for over 25 years, and the other one had just sold his company in New York, which is theatermania.com. He was also an artist. He comes as an artist first. He was a guitarist. He'd worked for record companies, but then he'd sort of made this huge .com company and grew it over the years, to do with theatre and all this kind of selling sort of tickets for Broadway and various things like that. So he'd sold that, moved down here, and he kind of came up with an idea for artists where we would sort of create like a financial education company that would focus on making sure that artists right across the board would really kind of know what to do with their finances when it comes to, are you doing anything to put towards retirement right now? Are you investing? Are you saving up for a house? What you should be doing, have you got life insurance or, any of these kind of things, or should you have it at this point? Should you be paying into the sort of actors equity pension fund, or what does that look like? All of these different things that kind of came up. So we decided to sort of build this company based on all of that kind of stuff, and really be able to do seminars and talk to artists about any of these kind of concerns that they may have, and if they needed to align themselves with some sort of financial person, that we would set that up for them. So it was something that was fairly close to my heart, at the beginning like that. Now, it was successful, but luckily for us, we started to think about maybe some of the other areas that may benefit from this. And just before COVID hit, luckily we were talking about expanding the company to, which would be called the IFWH, Financial Wellness for Healthcare Professionals. And we're so glad that we did at that point, because obviously when COVID hit, it meant that artists were not earning anything. Even, even the actors on Broadway and stuff like that just stopped. But the people that really did need help were the healthcare workers. So we're lucky that we sort of pivoted in time, that we were able to do that. And now we've actually expanded again. So the parent company is now the IFW, the Institute of Financial Wellness. And then it has the verticals. So it has the artist vertical, it has the healthcare vertical. We help the baby boomer generation now, where they're the people that really need some help just sorting out their retirement aspects. And then we also looking for a sort of an insurance side of things to help people in the public sector, like teachers and the police and firemen and stuff like that. So it was a good idea to start with, just for artists, but we sort of quickly found out that there's so many other people that needed that kind of financial education platform.
Right.
So we're offering it now to a lot of other people, and instead of going and doing seminars, we're doing all of this via webinars.
Okay.
We're using Zoom, the technology that's now with us, that people are now accepting finally. Before that, everyone just wanted to get face to face.
Right.
But so many people now are like, well, we can't do that.
Right.
Let's embrace the technology and use it to its full capacity.
Yeah. First, I think that's great. Is finances and I think the staggering number, and of course I don't know this number, but I know it's not very high, is what the amount most people average don't have a certain amount of savings, right? Or they're a check, paycheck to paycheck, or or so forth. So again, financial, just controlling that and learning about it, and to I think it's great. Again, where I first, kind of, it's great to hear that it's expanded into other areas. And,
right.
Especially artists, where they probably, don't have, nobody's telling them how to, some that may have figured it out and how to invest and how to do the right thing so they can go long term, but most aren't.
Yeah, I mean, you have the sort of very successful people that have obviously got sort of fee-based financial planners, doing things but obviously sort of paying for every step of the way. But you have a lot of people that are professional artists out there, that are actually earning good money. Actors that are on Broadway and stuff, they're earning six figures. You've got musicians out there. It's not all just starving artists. But the starving artists need information in terms of, what happens when you do get money. You don't just, if you can really kind of resist just
the temptation
of doing, just spending it on whatever.
Right.
The earlier that you can start actually doing something with it that's going to work for you over time and that you're going to benefit from later on down the line, the better. So if you can do that, great. The people that are earning a lot of money but really don't have that financial education or someone to talk to about what to do with it, we can help there too,
right.
Strike up that kind of relationship so that they have a point person that they can always call upon if they have any questions or if they feel like they want to do something.
And there's so many sad stories about, right, I think there's countless musicians, artists, or other areas of arts as well, as just the stories of how they were like, you're on MTV or you're on this, and
right,
you've got nothing to show for it. And again, there's all that you find out that there's somebody along the line got their hand out that you've got to, and you're like, wait a minute, when do I get paid? And I'm the product,
right?
And that's.
And one of the biggest mistakes that by the time you get to that point, and I can speak from personal experience, when it really starts to happen, finally, you've worked so hard and then you're right there and everything's coming in and you're sending off invoices. You always think it's going to be that way. You spent so much time getting there, you're like, right, this is it now. And for so many people, that means that they are just looking at that money and going, oh, I can do this and I can spend that and I can go and buy that nice car. And, and then suddenly one day, for whatever reason it might be,
right,
it's not going to happen that way anymore. And maybe you have to start again and start climbing that ladder again or move in a different direction. And there's going to be a certain amount of time where you're not earning any money anymore.
Right.
What did you do? Did you put some money aside for a rainy day, or did you do that, or did you just, think, this is great. You know, it's always going to be like this. I've got no worries.
Yeah.
I did that.
Live for today and
Right.
don't worry about tomorrow.
Right.
So, so in the and that kind of leads in right into there. You know, is there an article in the Drummer magazine in April 2010. So
was that when it was?
Yeah, 10 years. I know, right?
Wow.
I know. Yeah, you were talking about some, we were just talking about there, right? Is some bad timing of opportunities in '05 when it went from feast to famine. You know? So, I mean, what's the, right, again, talking about the diverse in your music career or your,
Yeah, so at that point, going back to that conversation that Paul Harris had with our new A&R guy at the time, I remember whilst we were we were in LA or something in a hotel, and we were actually all in a jacuzzi, and we were talking about what we were doing. It was coming up towards the end of '05, and
that sounds very rock and roll. By the way,
it did sound like very rock and roll.
And we're in a jacuzzi with champagne,
having a business meeting about the calendar from 2006 moving forward. And they were saying, right, we're going, get Christmas and New Year out the way, then we're off to Australia and we're doing something in Australia, and then we come back and we do this and blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, okay, great. It seems like my 2006 calendar is filling up nicely.
Yeah.
And then I'm not sure whether this happened either, before Christmas 2005 or into 2006, but when the A&R guy got sacked and the new A&R guy came in, and they had that sort of conversation with Paul. Paul just then left the band. Wow. The calendar just got stripped. Ben followed suit. It meant that Steve was literally just there on his own. We literally had maybe 2 other shows in 2006. One was supposed to be like a farewell show at Shepherd's Bush Empire in London. And then there was another thing that came in after that was supporting Grace Jones, I think. But that was, I'd gone from like a full calendar to 2 gigs with Dirty Vegas. And suddenly I was just sort of left out in the wilderness a little bit, kind of going, well, what do I do now? Financially, I probably had enough of a cushion to last me about 6 months. I just had a kid. All of these sort of different things that were happening, and I had to rethink a lot of things. I had to rethink a lot and start calling up some of my old bands and artists, of which, anyone that was giving me work, could only give me something maybe 3 months out, because everything else had been booked and planned with other people.
Right.
So, that was a real kind of tough pill to swallow at that point, where, you're sort of riding on this wave and everything's going great. And, financially and work-wise, you're right there at the top of the tree, only for it all to just be pulled from under you. And it can happen to anyone, anytime. And I didn't have all of my ducks in a row. Right. Let's say it that way, and it took a lot for me to pull back some of the work that I wasn't doing anymore, and do some other things in order to sort of start climbing that ladder again.
Right.
So
it's again, and those that are listening here, it's just some of this great advice and experience that Rees can share is just take it and try not to make the same mistakes. I know it's take from his wisdom and but then also to see how it's you've kind of turned things around and got your back at it.
Yeah, and it's, if you've got that kind of work ethic anyway, it's going to happen. It may take a little longer than you expect, but you have to kind of take some time to sort of lick your wounds. And what else are you going to do? You just have to get right back up again, and here we go again.
Right. Yep.
But the main thing is that we're musicians, and as long as we have the love and the passion for music and playing the music, that's always going to be the fuel to kind of keep you going.
Right.
And the one thing that I always say is this all should be fun first. You know, if you don't enjoy this anymore, believe me, don't get into the music industry anymore because you think that you're going to make a lot of money out of it. You might, but the chances are that you probably won't.
Right.
It's all about enjoying the music, having fun, and as long as that's happening, then fantastic. If you do not enjoy it and you're getting all stressed out and, you know, it's just not fun for you anymore, then move on and do something else.
Great. That's great advice. So we had a question there about okay, there we go. So we got our came back to our question about the snap here.
Where he's getting this killer snap from his snare drum, and it looks like he's barely swinging.
Right.
In the traditional form. Well, yeah, I mean he's making sure that he's hitting that rim shot as well. You know, if you want to get that really nice snap from a snare drum on the backbeat, there's a way of being able to make sure that you're hitting both the skin and the rim at the same time, and that gives you that really beautiful snap, you know, loud, and then it means that you've got such a nice distance between all the ghost notes that you're playing on the top, and then you have the backbeat. Listen to Stuart Copeland from The Police doing that. He's just a master at just making sure that hand is coming up.
You'll hear it.
Yeah, you'll definitely hear it there, definitely.
Is that and Buddy was playing with his snare slightly right? So
yeah.
To help, you know, get in that right position.
In that sort of military way, how the drums used to hang, you know, when you used to stand up and play with a sling on, he would have the drum angled away like that. So, you know, it was you'd be playing it the same way as if you were playing military style, which every drummer, I think, that up to that point was doing. But, you know, even now, if you are a traditional player, you do have to set up the snare drum and the toms in a different way to someone with a match grip. You know, everything needs to be sort of slightly more level. So if you're not someone that brings your snare drum slightly away from you, it has to be pretty much flat, or it can be a little bit towards you. The toms can't be sort of up and angled down. They need to be sort of lower and flatter. You know, because of just the way that the angle that the stick hits the head, you know, naturally it needs to be set up. If you've got too much of an angle, it's just going to pit the stick into the head, and you're going to be spending a lot of money on new drum heads quite often.
So good question there. All right, that rum looks pretty good. What kind is it? Do you have a favorite rum? So what we have here, is a Floridicana. This is an 18-year single estate, so it's one of those that's, you know, most rums you probably folks kind of think about is in a daiquiri or some type of mixed cocktail and so forth, but in maybe not as much as a sipping rum, you know, where most people probably think of whiskeys and bourbons as a you know, a sipping, but you know, this is an 18-year here. This is actually made from, and I'm not going to ask you where it's made from. So, okay. So if you guess, you already had trouble saying the word. Yeah. That so
please don't ask me to say that word again.
So it's from Nicaragua.
Yeah.
So, yes,
there you go.
There you go. So
just the English accent just can't get around that word.
Right. So,
it sounds ridiculous.
So what drummer inspired you to be a professional? Not a rock star, but a full professional in the aspect. Good question. Yes,
Great question.
Thank you, Justin.
I remember being at school one day, and a friend of mine who had sort of got a part-time job in a drum store, came in with the Buddy Rich Memorial Concert video, which meant it should have been about 1989, I guess. And this video had Dave Weckl, Vinnie Colaiuta, and Steve Gadd on it.
Is that like the Mount Rushmore?
Oh my God, I couldn't believe. I was looking at this thing going, so this is a video, like, also in the UK, we were probably a little bit later to have this kind of stuff come over to us, but this was a video where the cameras were on the drummers, 100%, you know? So we ran back to my friend's house. We put that video in after school. We watched Dave Weckl and Vinny and doing all their thing, their drum solo, their 3 drum solo thing. That video changed my life. No doubt about it. What I saw in that video opened my eyes to what you could really do on a drum kit. And I remember watching it again and again and again, and running home as fast as I could to get on my drums and to start working out some of the licks that I've seen. And I started to set my drum kit up differently at that point, and start working out all of these different things that I was just suddenly. It was almost like a library of drumming information exploded in front of me, and I was like, wow. I thought I had it. I don't have it. There's a lot that I need to learn. But so when it came down to it, at that point, I grabbed everything that Weckl was doing with the Chick Corea Electric Band, all that kind of stuff. I grabbed everything that Vinny had done and was doing up to that point, especially at that point. I think he just started doing his work with Sting. So that marriage of being a pretty amazing best drummer, for me, I think Vinny is the best drummer in the world. I'm just going to put that out there. But to have someone of such ability working with generally like a pop artist, and that marriage between the two, I loved that.
Right.
And then just watching him sort of just go all over the place on the drum kit in the live touring sort of sessions for when he was with Sting and stuff. I mean, it's amazing. And then Gad, I mean, what can you say about Gad? He was the godfather of that whole style of playing, and so if I had to choose one, it would be Vinny, but certainly Weckl, Gad, Dennis Chambers, who else could I? There was a whole bunch of American drummers at that time that had that kind of style, playing that kind of style of music, but session guys, and then from the UK, I was listening to people like Phil Gould from Level 42, Gary Husband, who took over from Phil Gould from Level 42, Mel Gaynor from Simple Minds, Stuart Copeland from The Police, Mark Brzezicki, who was actually is in a band called Big Country, but he used to play with the Cult and a whole bunch of other bands. And I actually got a chance to hang out with him in Miami in March, because they came down here to do a show. And I remember we had a great conversation. I picked him up the next day. I took him down to Resurrection Drums to show him Resurrection, and we chatted about everything drums and Big Country and stuff. And he was a massive influence on me as well. So around that time there were a lot of amazing drummers really on the scene, in the limelight as well. Famous sort of pop acts that had great drummers. You had the DCI videos that just started coming over from America with the Buddy Rich guys, and then they would do their tuition videos that you could grab. So it was a really great time to be able to just focus in on a lot of those amazing drummers,
Right. Back in the VH, pre YouTube days.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
those DCI videos, man, they weren't cheap. You had to save up your pennies. They were like
$40 at least. Yeah. So definitely
saving up your I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever money your parents were giving to you, or you
got to mow a lot of grasses,
right? Exactly.
Grass to get there.
Yeah.
So speaking of the videos and so forth, you've got a book and DVD.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I did start writing a book that was going to be turned into a DVD, but other things started getting in the way, and the whole thing has kind of been shelved for a while. And also, at that point I suddenly realized, why am I writing a book or a DVD? It's such an old platform now. It should be maybe put into an online course or something like that. But yeah, that's kind of I haven't kind of gone back to that. I haven't had time to get back to that yet. But
like you said, it's the same idea and concept, but maybe into a different
Right.
platform
Right.
or
Exactly.
media.
And the whole philosophy of the book or the DVD, whatever you want to call it, was about thinking back to how I learned how to play when I was a kid, and sort of knowing how to play a lot of these different sort of rudiments and various things without really knowing what they were.
Right.
So, I'd sort of done a bit of research, and I found that, at the time, there were sort of 26 different recognised snare drum rudiments in the UK, and now here I think it's coming up to about 40. And there's so many different things, and I was like, well, hang on a minute. Why are they calling these snare drum rudiments when really what's going on here is just a combination of rudiments to me? So I've always said that there's only 8 snare drum rudiments. When I used to teach, I used to sort of say to the guys, right, calm down, it's not as bad as you think. We're not going to go through these books and how many of them are there where it's just rudiment after rudiment after rudiment. There are 8 rudiments. There's a single stroke roll, there's a double stroke roll, there's a paradiddle, there's a triplet, there's the multiple bounce, which is very important, to make sure that you know what's going on when you throw that stick down and how it rebounds up and how you can control that. There's the unison stroke, something that a lot of drummers seem to just sort of pass by, how we do flams, that's another one as well, flams. But a unison stroke, how you can get 2 sticks down at exactly the same time with no flamming. Can you do that? Can you actually do that if you're just literally on a practice pad, both hands at the same time going down? Are they falling on that pad or drum at exactly the same time? And it's something we all do every day when we're playing beats. If you're playing hi-hat, snare drum, kick, that hi-hat and that snare drum is coming down at some point at exactly the same time. That's a unison stroke. You should pay some attention to how that's actually happening. Buzz rolls, obviously. Is that it? Is that 8? I think that's 8. And so everything else is a combination of those things.
Right.
So as long as you practice those, and then think about how you combine them in a more musical way rather than a list of other snare drum rudiments. So then it would have a theme where we're going to take 16th notes at a tempo that you're comfortable with, and we're going to accent every quarter note, starting with the first note with all of these rudiments. So you would have, the first, the fifth, as you're going along, that's your first exercise. Let's say you were just doing a single stroke roll. That's your first exercise. Then we're going to move that quarter note 1 down, so it starts with the second note, which means that you're actually accenting on the second, on the left hand. Then it moves to the third and the fourth. If you apply that whole thing with those 8 snare drum rudiments, it means that at some point down the line, not only are you doing something more musical because you're adding dynamics into it, you're playing to time, but in the end, you'll find that you're playing 5-stroke rolls, you're playing 6-stroke rolls, you're playing all of these other things without even realizing. It's just that those fundamental snare drum rudiments are being applied in a more musical way, and you can think about them musically. The road from playing snare drum rudiments to playing music is a lot shorter, thinking of it in that way, than, all right, now I'm on rudiment 36 and now I've got to learn how to do that and then think about how I apply that to my music and my playing. So that's kind of where it all comes from. Right. It's just I haven't had time to just, get it out there yet.
Well, definitely a good start there, right? So right, back to keep it simple, right?
Keeping it simple, breaking it down into really the elements,
right?
And those 8 elements is really where it all stems from. Everything is right. On the feet, on the hands anyway. Then you can then incorporate the feet where you were playing accents on the hands. You can then incorporate a bass drum or a left foot,
right,
or even a rest. So instead of playing an accent, you're actually resting on that note, and then your whole control and the musicality is really starting to form.
Right.
So one day, hopefully I'll get it somewhere.
So yeah, as we've talked about how crazy this year has been, 2020, and a lot's going on, and I think you kind of already touched a little bit about it, is, COVID, right? It's kind of really hampered down a lot of performances and gigs and so forth. And I mean, other ways that COVID's kind of really impacted you.
Apart from actually getting it,
right? Yeah, well, yes.
I did get it in early July, and I was just in bed for 4 or 5 days, just feeling terrible. But I think, I've had a couple of times where I felt sort of fed up and frustrated with things that I wanted to happen that didn't.
Right.
But I think I've been one of the lucky ones, because I was able to sort of pivot with the IFW and make sure that I could sort of still keep working and help people at the same time. There were other things. Right at the beginning of the lockdown, I was actually moving house, and if for some reason, because of the lockdowns and stuff like that, all of the removal companies were just not working or wasn't allowed to.
Right.
So I had to move myself, the whole thing, my whole family and the furniture and everything. So that kept me busy.
Right.
But like I say, in terms of the impact, I feel like I'm very lucky in the fact that we had something to do, something that helped others, something that still kept me busy. We still, I still had, in terms of media, I still had my studio where I was kind of working on things there. We did live streams. We did as much as we possibly could.
Right.
The downside, the thing that's really kind of affected me the most, is the fact that I'm not able to get back to the UK to see my family. My eldest son's still there, my parents, who are now getting a little older, and there's just absolutely no point, and it's not worth the risk,
right,
to expose them to anything. So and I was really hoping to get over and see them at Christmas. I really thought that this may have kind of got to a point where that would have been possible,
right?
And I was really hoping,
right,
and now it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to. So
right.
That's the one sort of downside with this, the fact that I've just got to kind of find the strength within me just to hold out a little longer. And now, so maybe Easter time, when they start rolling out the vaccines to the elderly, and
right,
maybe there's going to be a chance then that I can get over there and see everyone.
Right. Yeah, that's and I think we're all can't wait. And I know here in Florida, it's been approached different, and didn't want to get into a political thing, and everyone's got different. But again, at the end of the day, it's like everyone needs to decide how they want to approach things differently, or how they want to approach for their situation. I'm with you there about like a lot of folks who just kind of we understand the gravity of it, but at the same time we're also very this is just because you've taken things away that we've normally had the pleasures of, and even though most people can still do it, it's just that you were putting that risk out there.
Yeah, I think that, there's so many people now that are just like, I'm so done. I need to get out. I need to see people.
Yeah. Right.
And I actually really liked the fact that we did this festival a couple of weeks ago, because it was socially distanced, and it was sort of handled correctly. But it did give people that had not been out in 9 months or whatever a chance to actually come out and just, in an outside setting, see a few bands play, go and look at some stalls, have a few drinks.
Right. Feel somewhat normal.
Yeah.
Right.
And obviously there were some people that took it to extremes. At the end of the night, I'm kind of driving back, and we see some people that are just blind drunk on the streets. And we just thought, sometimes it's going to happen. If this was the first night that you've been out in 9 months, there's going to be some people that took it to the extreme.
Right.
We certainly saw that. But,
right.
Yeah.
So, All right. So, all right. I think we're caught up on questions there for the moment. So, all right. So you've got enough there, Reese. Okay. So here's the rapid fire here. So this is a I don't think it's too bad, right? It's
Okay.
it's I think we've touched upon a lot of things. It's basically you got 3-5 seconds to answer. It's either usually this or that, a yes or no, and then of course, and we could talk a little bit about it. So here we go. I think I already know the answer to. Well, this is going to be a tough one actually, but I think maybe the first one here. All right, London or Miami?
Miami.
Okay, I was thinking the other way there. Okay, again, it's not as cold and rainy. Well, there's rain here in Florida, but not.
It's not the same.
Yeah, right. Electronic or acoustic drums?
Acoustic.
Okay. All right. The Smiths or Morrissey?
The Smiths.
Okay. All right. So, so that wasn't too bad.
Oh,
that wasn't too bad. So yeah, the joys of living in Florida. Again, we have to worry about hurricanes. We all say here in Florida, we're living in paradise. We occasionally get our cold. We occasionally get some rain. Occasionally, unlike this year, like everything else about 2020, we occasionally get a hurricane or at least, it's been a pretty kind of. It actually hasn't been really that bad. We've lucked out this year for Florida compared to other parts of the country or the world even, right? Especially Central America there with
It has seemed to have rained here a lot more though than it normally does.
It has rained a lot more. You're right, and I think we've had much more. We're supposed to be in the dry season, right now, and it's still rainy. Yeah, right. And even I think earlier this year it was there were certain periods where it was. Maybe back in the fall, it just seemed like it rained the entire
Every
month.
day.
Yeah. It's like, all right, bad enough we're all stuck in a house, at least have some sun and not be too. If that was the case, then I just might as well move to Seattle or London, right?
Exactly. I kept looking out the window going, I didn't sign up for this. That's the reason why I moved.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I'm someone that needs sun in my life and looking at the water, you know. Otherwise I get very depressed. But I love, obviously, those two things. I love the pace of life down here. And you know what? There's good and bad to say about everywhere. London has some amazing things going for it. But my conclusion was when my wife lived down here, she actually moved down here before we kind of started to live together. So when I would come over, I would always look forward to coming to Florida and then be depressed when I had to go back to London. And then when she moved to London with me, it was the same kind of thing where we would always look forward to going back to Miami. And then coming into Heathrow again was always such a depressing thing. So we said, all right, well, why don't we flip it around? So it means that we're always retreating back to Miami, but we always look forward to going and seeing everyone in London when we go.
Yeah.
And it works out. That dynamic works for me.
Oh, good. So the electronic acoustic drums then, yeah. So as you said, you started with your V drums there. Right.
That's early sort of V drum technology.
And that's so much has come along, right?
God,
right.
It's crazy. Yeah. And I've been using Roland stuff now for many years. At the time then, during that album, it was the TD-10. Now we're at the TD-50. It's and apart from that, there's so many other great things that you can use.
Right.
But I am a traditionalist at heart, and my drums, my acoustic drums, and my cymbals and everything are the reason why I drummer in the first place, and that'll never change.
Right. Especially when there's a power outage and the drums are still going, right? That's right. You're still going to hear the drummer.
The electronics is literally a tool that I use to stay in the game.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
Nothing more than that.
So being in a tribute band of the Smiths and Morrissey, so you said Morrissey.
No, I said the Smiths.
Oh, I said the Smiths. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean the Smiths. The music that they kind of put out in a very short space of time,
right?
You know, that marriage of Johnny Marr's guitar playing and Morrissey's vocal. And not to mention, you know, the bass and the drums in there, you know, again, when you think that you really know a song, when you feel like you've been listening to it for decades, and then you kind of go in and you start to learn them and sort of pull them apart, and you're like, wow, you know, didn't really know that it was a little bit more sort of intricate than what comes off on the surface, you know?
Right.
Yeah, you know, that whole kind of band thing and what they did in that short space of time, I think, is pretty special.
So that's and I guess I'll throw in one other one there. So some of the couple places here in South Florida that you kind of like to play. It's, and again, I know maybe obviously not every venue is probably, you know, every venue is set for the type of music, right? You know, whether it's your tiki bar, you know, you're not gonna go see, you know, there's not gonna be a punk band playing in a tiki bar on the water. But I mean, places like Respectables, I think that's like perfect for that style. And I've seen quite a few bands there, and that place has been there forever. Like, or even Churchill's
pub.
That's a little you know.
I've never played Churchill's, but I've been there once.
Right.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, a lot of great places there in you know, in South Florida, between here, Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami. So
yeah, I mean, Revolution in Fort Lauderdale is a place that we play locally, which is a great place actually. And there's another place up here that we used to play. It's a theatre. Kelsey Theatre.
Yes. So, yep.
So we used to play the Kelsey quite a lot up here.
Okay.
But again, talking about the kind of venues that seem to fit certain genres of music and stuff like that, Respectables seem to just attract more of the kind of people that we play to. You know, the
fans, you know, of that
fans
style.
of the Smiths and that kind of alternative music. Yeah.
Yeah. We were. The Kelsey Theater and a lot of that's over there. That whole strip is almost you know, I think all under the same umbrella that I think I'm gonna probably say his name wrong. I think AJ Brockman, I think is okay. So I'm getting a signal there from the booth that I got it right. So yeah, they put on some great, you know, it's great to see, you know, folks that are, you know, whether it's venue owners, whether it's studios like here, Live Music Community, you know, and we're all bringing it all together. You know, everyone's got a part that, you know, whether it's the promoting and the platform, it's totally awesome that we can all come together and kind of, you know, fans of music or the, you know, the ones that create it and so forth. So all right. So I think we're caught up on our chat there. So, But so real quick, Rees, anything you want to go ahead? I know we talked a little bit about it. I think when we go ahead and wrap up and close, is anything to plug or kind of promote there?
Just let me think about this. What have I got going on? Ordinary Boys, I think, have just released that we will be doing a New Year's Eve show. Now I know that I'm not going back to the UK. We're doing a New Year's Eve show in Miami, which will have some sort of special element to it.
Okay.
I can't remember the name of the venue. Let's just go on to ordinaryboys.com and it'll be there. And then obviously Crystal Visions, Abacoa, on February 13th.
Right.
Check the websites for any up and coming things. There's always things now kind of being offered and coming in. It's just obviously with the uncertainty of what's going on with COVID and stuff like that, you know, everyone's sort of holding back a little bit. But I think that very soon, you know, there's going to be new things coming into the diary. You know, we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, I think.
Right. Yeah. No, that's all right. And so they can check out your stuff at Rees ReesBridges.net is your website, and we'll put that in the post show notes and so forth. So all right, so I appreciate it today coming up from Miami. I know it was at least it was a nice, you know,
nice day,
nice drive up 95. So here, and enjoying some rum with us here at Justin Hucker's new studio. He's opened up there, live music community here. Appreciate him letting us use the space today, as well as check out all the Facebook Drums and Rums on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. And if you've been following me on over there on social media, I've been doing a daily rum advent reveal. So I've got a different rum every day that I'm checking it out and sharing. So, but I super appreciate the time today, Rees.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please all check out Ordinary Boys. If you're living here in Jupiter, we'll post on there. We'll make sure we'll promote there for Crystal Visions. I think it'll be a great night over there in Abacoa here in Jupiter to check out. Great. So I guess you're Mick Fleet. You're Mick, right?
I'm tall and English, and
you go.
graying quite quickly, and I think I fit the bill, right?
So, all right, all. So I appreciate today for listening. This is Paul. We're the Backbeats Meets the Spirits. Thanks.